So this whole movie, Suitable Flesh as a whole, feels like that very dangerous segment in Teen Witch, where I feel like I have to have my hand on the remote in case my mom walks in so I can change the channel very quickly.
I had that experience many times, yes. And maybe for Teen Witch too, who knows?
We are here with Mr. Joe Lynch talking about Suitable Flesh. So I didn't know what to expect necessarily because the main thing I've been hearing about this is it's horny, horny, horny. But
Barbara's gonna be so mad you said that.
But now, no, this is
what you need to do is now cut in like sexy, 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 titillating, scandalous. Just throw that stuff in and she'll be fine.
But now I know why Barbara said it's not necessarily horny, it's more of an erotic thriller.
Yes.
Because it is horny, yeah, but it does have erotic thriller vibes.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me so much of shit that I watched like in the 90s.
Yeah.
And the sexy sax comes in.
Oh, yeah.
And then we have this kind of like a soft kind of focus happening.
Mm-hmm.
And it very much, it made me feel transported because I felt like I wasn't supposed to be watching it. It's like what I would come across when I was a kid and I would watch something.
It felt a little dangerous,
it
right?
Does,
it was one of those
I'm not
movies,
supposed to be here.
that was so important for us on two fronts. One, Reanimator and From Beyond were those movies for me where I'm like, I had to beg the guy at the video store to be like, come on, dude. Like, I swear it's a horror movie. He's like, no, man, I heard this movie's got a lot of sex in it. I'm like, no, there's nothing. Don't worry about that. It's fine. So those films felt dangerous to us where we would like sneak home and go like, oh, God.
Right.
The problem is my mom was a big horror movie fan. So she'd be like, oh, what are you watching? You know, like, no, mom, get out of the room. Like, no, go away. Weirdly enough, then having my mom and Barbara meet was very like surreal, where I'm like, you don't know half the history that I've had with Barbara Crampton back in the day as a kid. But also with the whole 90s thing, I know, right? We're disgusting. But the whole 90s aesthetic of like erotic thrillers that we were growing up with, that was something that was really interesting that I'm glad that people are picking up on because, you know, one of the things I love about the story is that Lovecraft loves their protagonists to tell a story. And when you think about the subjectivity of when you are kind of delving into the mind of the person who is being the storyteller, they are coming from a particular point aesthetically that like you're burrowing into their brain and going like, well, what would their version of their story look like? Right. And I like, this is something that I talked about with Barbara, but also more importantly with Heather, because she was curious like how I was going to portray the story in her head. And I'm like, oh, you grow up in the in the 70s and 80s as well, and you watched a lot of those movies as well. So in your head, you've projected yourself into an 80s and 90s erotic thriller. So it should look like that. It should have somewhat of a dream logic. It should have that kind of washed out pallor. Because if you look at the moments before and after when we come in and out of the story, it has a different look. It has a different aesthetic. But in her head, she's watching what's now referred to as a Lifetime erotic thriller, whereas back in the day, those are the kind of things that we were, getting from the video store or watching at 10 o'clock on Skinamax. So that was very deliberate. Some people like it, some people don't, but it was very deliberate.
There's that wonderfully weird trailer that came out with like the very 90s vibes with the voiceover,
Yes.
And once I saw this, I was like, I loved the trailer when I saw it because I was like, this is so weird. This is like not what I was expecting. It's great.
Yeah.
But when I saw the movie, I was like, this makes all the fucking sense because it is a 90s erotic thriller kind of
The fact that we have sexy sax in there alone, But again, those are the things that, like, language-wise, are part of erotica for a very particular generation of people. So again, in Heather's head, when she's having sexy time with some of the characters in the movie, in her head she's probably thinking Tim Capello from Lost Boys is in the background going like, I still believe in you, Heather. He doesn't sound like that at all. But those are the things that we wanted to infuse into the storytelling, because I think it would have been different if the character was younger,
Right.
And that was something that was very difficult to really get everybody behind at first, because, when we're getting all the casting, it was women in their 20s and 30s in the role. And I'm like, look, and Barbara was the first person to say, I played a 20-year-old psychologist in From Beyond, and everyone gave me shit. So we should think about going older, and that's how I wanted to do it from the beginning. I wanted to have older characters in this because older people like to have sex as well.
Yes,
There's nothing
yeah.
wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with putting that on screen in a way that is positive. It's not like sometimes positive. Things don't turn out so well for some of the characters, so it's a bit of a cautionary tale. But to really hone in on allowing these characters to be sexual and to be sexy was really important to us. And I mean, that's one thing that Barbara professed again early on. And then when you get Heather Graham, to come in, and not just for the fact that she's not too hard on the eyes, but she's the type of actress who is fearless. And as you saw, like, she gets pretty crazy at times, but she was gung-ho the whole way.
How did that come to be, the casting? Because I feel like you have Barbara, who's obviously an icon, and then you brought in these other people, and it's not a very conventional script. So you're pitching them on this, and it's people who don't normally dabble in that space necessarily.
Heather, I thought was going to be a hard sell, but she loved the fact that, and she kept even saying, like, I don't know if this is a horror movie or not. She saw it more as a kind of melodrama, something that like Douglas Sirk or even like early John Waters would have tackled it in his own unique way. Obviously all the gooey stuff was in there too, but she saw it from a character standpoint, and the fact that any actor today is being told that you can play roughly up to 4 roles in a way, that's catnip. Like, that's them. They're just like, sold. Like, I'm in. I thought she was going to be a harder sell, but 20 minutes into our conversation, I think she was just making sure that I wasn't just a smutty schmo.
Yeah.
That I was trying to do what I was trying to do, respectfully and not exploitatively. But by 20 minutes in, I think she was just like, all right, we're in.
You're a schmo, but I'm in anyway.
You may be a schmo, but you're not a smutty schmo. Judah was the hardest person to bring on board, like at least the character was, because you have another actor who's got to play 3 or 4 roles. And that's not easy, as much as it is like exciting, but it's still, there's a lot of work involved. And we went through a ton of casting, and I had been told about Judah through Samara Weaving, who I worked with on Mayhem, because she worked with him on The Babysitter and the sequel. And I thought, like, well, that's interesting, but he works with like big time directors now. He wouldn't be slumming it with me. And again, it was one of those things where he didn't read for it. He was just like, let's have a conversation. And I mean, 15 minutes into just talking about like Richard Linklater movies, and I was like, all right, this kid cares about the art form. He's into the beat. So by the end, he was like, do you want me to read for you? I'm like, no, dude, we're good, And then everyone else fell into place from there. I had worked with Jonathan Sheck on Creepshow, and my wife Becca, who was very much a big part of this movie from the beginning. I walked in one day and she goes, "What about Sheck?" And I went, "Yeah, what about Sheck?" Texted him. He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And that was it. Like, it was just great. And then Bruce Davison, again, it was hard to find someone that would be up for that sort of thing. But the fact that that Barbara had known him for years, and then he was like, "This sounds fascinating. I'm in." So the cast, once Heather was in, it kind of all steamrolled from there and just snowballed. It was no steamrollers, snowballed. Sorry, now you have to edit that, or keep it in. It's fine. But yeah, the cast was fantastic, and they were all so generous and collaborative with each other, because they had to come up with all these little details to make sure that, like, well, if Bruce says it like that, then that means that Barbara's got to say it in a certain, or Heather's got to say it in a certain way, or Judah's got to say it in a certain way. It was fascinating to see them like trade little details with each other to make sure that the entity was consistent.
Do you think this experience would alter the way that you go into your next project as far as who you're approaching? Because you just said, like, I didn't think they would want to work with me. I didn't think they'd be into it. Do you think you would feel differently now approaching actors for your next project? Or are you still going to have the same, like, I don't know if they'll be into it?
I always feel that way.
No matter what,
I've been
default.
blessed. The thing is, I've been blessed every film that I've done, from, Henry Rollins to Peter Dinklage and Steve Zahn to Salma Hayek, Anthony Mackie, Stephen Yeun and Samara Weaving. Like, I'm always thinking of myself as like the lucky little underdog that gets really blessed with actors. I don't think that would change. I think that, I try to do something different with every movie I've done, like in one form or another. And this was definitely different than the last movie I've done and the movie that I've done before that. I think what's exciting now is, look, I've missed being in more of the horror realm. I like really missed it, and the fact that you guys have really like embraced that, because Fango has been part of my life for as long as I can remember. So to be on the cover, my mom called me crying.
Oh no!
Like, she called me
That's
crying.
amazing.
Yes, but I just feel at home in horror. So I think the thing that this movie helped me out with was that I'm home now.
Yeah.
Like, and I as much as I love me a romantic comedy, and who wouldn't mind, doing one of those. I feel like that's where I fit best, at least, in this. Now, if a superhero movie comes along and James Gunn gives me a little ringy ding, I'll be like, Swamp Thing, I'm in.
Yeah.
James, call me. But in fact, like, I've always been in the horror world, no matter what. Even the movie I did before this, which was a strictly action-based, like kind of buddy comedy. There's still moments that I can watch and go, that's a horror movie moment. That's definitely a horror movie moment. It's in my DNA.
Yeah.
So with this movie, this just kind of reminded me how much I love this genre, both watching it, but also making it.
Welcome home.
Thank you. Oh, stop! You're gonna make me cry now.
Yeah,
God damn
do it. This is like, I don't know if anyone has made this particular reference to you.
Boy,
I'm
oh
hoping
boy, oh boy.
not, but it's a weird one, and you might be like, what the fuck are you talking
No,
about?
you'd be surprised.
Did you ever watch Teen Witch?
Oh my God, with
Yeah?
Zelda Rubinstein?
Yes, okay.
100%.
So you've never heard of it, okay.
No. Like, we were just talking about Zelda Rubinstein. Do you remember Anguish?
I don't think I saw that one.
Oh my God, it's a movie that hypnotizes you
Okay.
with Zelda Rubinstein. Not unlike the hypnotic filmmaking behind Teen Witch.
Ah, okay.
Wow, okay.
Okay. So there's
Continue. I want to hear where this is going. This is going to be
So
interesting.
Teen Witch is by no means a dangerous movie, right? It's like if you're a 10-year-old, 8-year-old kid, you can watch that and your parents aren't going to think that's weird. There is a very strange, out-of-place segment in the middle of Teen Witch. I don't know if you recall.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
The heartthrob of the school falls in love with our Teen Witch protagonist. Yep. They go to an abandoned house. There's a lot of sexy sax music playing. Clothes are coming off. There's a trail of clothes that we're following up. And that moment feels very, very dangerous and very erotic.
It felt almost... because that was one of those movies that played at 3 o'clock on HBO. And all of a sudden you're going, this is... like, was this a producer's note? Like, where did this come from? Oh, I remember that moment.
It's totally, completely opposite of everything else in the movie. And it's the only moment that feels dangerous. And I remember being very young and being like, this feels like, I don't know.
Isn't the actress who plays the Teen Witch the same actress from Night of the Creeps?
Robin Lively.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, see, I know this movie well. Because it was one of those, like, hey, this movie's giving me all the feels.
Yes, I was like, I feel weird, but also like
I'm now using Teen Witch.
Amazing.
I'm taking Teen Witch as
I'm so glad no one else mentioned this. I didn't think they would, but just kind of nothing else about it has that tone, but just that dangerousness of watching Teen Witch, being allowed to watch it because it's kind of a kid's movie.
Yeah.
And then that sexy time comes.
The
and
VHS
I felt like
box was so wholesome.
Yes, the most wholesome thing that exists.
And then all of a sudden it
gets
you
very
go,
sexy.
Whoa, holy crap, sexy times.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I remember it well.
But this whole movie, Suitable Flesh as a whole, feels like that very dangerous segment in Teen Witch, where I feel like I have to have my hand on the remote in case my mom walks in, so I can change the channel very quickly.
I had that experience many times. Yes. And maybe for Teen Witch too. Who knows? Well, the thing is with like just sex in horror and genre, it's been a little dormant, I guess. And I think there's multiple reasons for that. But the other thing too is when I was growing up, God, it's gonna make me sound old. Back in my day, I was terrified of sex because when you're growing up in the '80s, you had the 1-2 punch of, all right, I've watched enough slasher movies and sex equals death, and then the AIDS crisis. I was like, man, like I'm no pun, I'm screwed,
Yeah.
or not. And when you go into growing up into sexuality in those forms, and then you're getting into the 90s, and sex started to kind of become more prevalent in like thrillers and like erotic thrillers and stuff like that, and some horror, but it was always coming from a point of danger. And that was something that we talked about a lot on this was, like if we were going to have sex in this film, it had to be for a good reason. It had to propel the plot. It had to propel the characters. That's what was so fascinating about the whole body swap idea, that you have this entity that is not out for world domination, that's not trying to, take over the country or take over the world. He is just exploring his own sexual identity.
A very horny entity.
Very horny entity. And, he was, the fact that like he's using different people's bodies like puppets, that's a little scarier to me.
Yeah.
The fact that you have sex as power, and that's why we were like, well, then we can't just cut away.
Right.
We can't do the line of clothes up to the bed and, sexy sax is starting to end, and, or you cut to like the hand clasping shots and then it fades to black. It's like, no, we had to show it. We had to show it for all of its moistness, if you will. And we also had to have actors who got that.
Right.
And thankfully between Heather and Judah and Jonathan specifically, our day one, we'll wrap this with this, I swear. I'm sorry, Brad. Our day one was so indicative of the shoot because it was Heather and Judah and Jonathan pretty much in various stages of undress, all in one, because there's this Texas switch moment where we swap out the bodies in a way in the same shot, and I needed to have both actors in the bed with Heather, and I was just like, what is going on from a production standpoint? But it was so exciting because I'm like, well, this makes sense for the story, that we would have this love triangle of sorts, and that these actors are fearless, that they were going into it knowing that this was part of the storytelling process. Sexuality, sexual identity, sexual fluidity needed to be in the forefront of the storytelling. And thankfully, I had, the icon of Stuart Gordon, who used that in a lot of his films. From Beyond is an incredibly sexually explorative film. It's not exploiting, it's explorative. It's challenging the audience to go, I do like leather. Absolutely. Or Reanimator, just with the sexuality in that, or even King of the Ants or Dagon, those are the things that, like, if I didn't have Stuart kind of on my shoulder going, I approve, I don't know how I would have been able to make this movie and make it the way I did.
It's Stuart Gordon by way of Joe Lynch.
It's Stuart Lynch.
Stuart Lynch.
It's Joe Gordon. Joe Gordon. We body swapped as well.
Oh, that's
so
right.
yeah. So so I'm coming back from the grave. Hi, it's Stuart. See my movie King of the Ants coming out never. Have you ever seen King of the Ants?
I have not.
So last thing, King of the Ants is this great movie that Stuart did where he made a film noir that came out in the like the 2000s. It was one of the first Asylum movies before they started making mockbusters.
Okay.
So, not to give too much away, and you can cut this out if you want, but the guy that that Heather is in therapy with, the guy who she hypnotizes at first, that is the character from King of the Ants.
Okay.
So I don't know if you picked up on those little Easter eggs, like Mace Jr., the security guard. That's Mace, the Mace from the original Reanimator. That's his son. Or even the fact that we did like the Miskatonic University.
Right.
That's the hospital from Miskatonic, actually on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles for all of you movie location fans out there. But those are the things that we wanted to connect together so that, like, not necessarily you have to see Reanimator to enjoy it, but at least you know that there's other stories in that world.
All the connective tissue, you're in this universe.
Yes. Connective tissue.
Connective tissue and Teen
Just
Witch.
like
You're welcome.
Suitable Flesh, Connective Tissue, Teen Witch. If you've learned nothing from this interview, you've got those 3 tidbits. So.
All right. Amazing. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank
Joe Gordon,
you.
JG.
Seriously. Yes. Thank you guys. Appreciate
Suitable
it.
Flesh. It's moist. It's sticky. It's wet. It's sexy sex.
I'm putting all those on the poster.